recently a guest on Newsmax made some claims about trans people literally just existing, claiming that it's a way to erase gay people. Now, this happened during a segment on the Rob Schmidt show, and they, of course, had a member of Gays Against Groomers making some pretty unhinged claims about trans people.
Chris, just let me get the final thoughts from you. I mean, they're talking about taking kids that are, 7, 10 years old and giving them hysterectomies and mastectomies.
Yeah, obviously that's something that Gays Against Groomers absolutely opposes.
Yeah.
The vast majority, I like to rattle off this little statistic
Sure,
quite a bit, and which is that 80 to 90% of kids that experience gender dysphoria, it resolves on its own. So why on earth are we doing this to kids? This is absolutely ridiculous. And then out of those 80 to 90%, the most of them grow up to be gay or lesbian people.
Yeah.
And so as a gay man, I didn't like it when we tried to pray away the gay.
Right.
Now we're trying to trans away the gay. And that's even more damaging, in my opinion. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's actually a really good way to put it. I hadn't thought of that,
But that's really dumb. That's what that is. Stupid. Because it's not true. It's not true. Okay, so look. Again, I don't think I should have to mention, but now because of these idiots, I do have to mention that 7 and 10-year-olds are not getting hysterectomies and mastectomies. I mean, it's outrageously false. There's no evidence whatsoever of any of that. Okay? He just takes that statement out of thin air and says, oh, yeah, no, it's a fact. Oh, yeah, 7 and 10-year-olds getting mastectomies. Really? Really? Now, look, hysterectomies, I don't know if you know this, but it's actually really, really difficult for even someone who's 25 to get a hysterectomy. Someone who's under 30 to get a hysterectomy. And again, generally 18 plus. 18 plus. Okay. So now, why are hysterectomies done for people 18 to 30 to begin with? Generally, it usually is done to treat certain gynecological conditions, right? Fibroids, cancer, uterine bleeding that hasn't responded to other treatments, childbirth complications. Now, that said, it's noted that it can be done for gender-affirming surgery. But again, gender-affirming surgery, not done on children. Certainly not done on 7 to 10-year-olds. Okay? Again, you have to be at least 18 to consent to an elective hysterectomy. And the vast majority of hysterectomies that happen are elective. So now let's go to his little stat that he rattles off. Once again, not a real thing. So he says 80 to 90% of kids that experience gender dysphoria grow out of it. No, they don't. No. And now he bases this on some pretty flawed studies. So one of them comes from the Desisting and Persisting Gender Dysphoria After Childhood study by Steensmet et al. In 2011. So that study itself had some issues and actually led to a follow-up to correct those issues. Now, for one, it included participants who had been diagnosed using different criteria from the DSM-4 and 5 and mixed up young people who had dysphoria, those that had only socially transitioned, and those who were gender nonconforming. They then treated those different participants as though they were all the same, that they were all experiencing gender dysphoria. They also counted participants who could not be contacted during the follow-up as having desisted. Oh, well, we can't get a hold of this person. They must have desisted. Or maybe they moved away. Maybe they changed their number. Maybe they changed their name after they transitioned. They had also counted participants who did not have gender dysphoria differently at the start and end of the study, counting people that, again, didn't even have dysphoria. Now, Steensma conducted a follow-up study called Factors Associated with Desistance and Persistence of Childhood Gender Dysphoria in 2013 to address these issues. and looked at a key additional factor, the intensity of gender dysphoria experienced, and of course the results he found were different. The study found that young people who actually met the clinical guidelines for gender dysphoria as children generally ended up as transgender adults. And this was a good indicator of those who would go on to transition medically. So, the follow-up study that actually looked at the proper things and did the proper methodology, it turns out, they found a high correlation between people who met the medical guidelines for having dysphoria as children and found out that they, again, ended up as transgender adults. Oops. Completely opposite of the study that before. But again, they don't like to cite the follow-up with the actual correct information. They continue to try to cite the flawed study. Weird. All right, there's more. Another study that cites the 80 to 90%, desistance rate is the Dr. Kenneth Zucker study. Again, they claimed at least 80% of people, trans people, desisted. That's, children who had dysphoria desisted later in life. However, again, there were issues with that. In fact, when patient files at the clinic that he was running reviewed by independent investigators, found that 42% of the children in his studies never even met the clinical criteria for juvenile gender dysphoria. So I guess it's pretty easy to desist when you never had gender dysphoria to begin with. Oops. Gee, no wonder. No wonder. Very strange. There's more. According to a 2003 report in the Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, they found that Zucker's techniques were disturbingly close to reparative therapy for gay people. So that is gay conversion therapy, which doesn't work. Author of the report, Phyllis Burke, questioned the idea that transgender children should be treated as mentally ill by saying the diagnosis of, at that time it was called gender identity disorder in children, as supported by Zucker and his colleagues, is simply child abuse. And in 2015, the clinic in Toronto that Zucker had worked at was closed down. Zucker was fired, and that followed an independent investigation which found some pretty disturbing things about, again, Kenneth Zucker, including treatment methodology that was about 30 years out of date, intrusive sexual questioning of children, conversion therapy practices, and inappropriate photography of children, among many other issues. One of those issues, apparently Zucker had conducted a study where prepubescent boys with gender dysphoria were rated by physical attractiveness. What in the groomer is going on here? Okay? You want to talk about gays against groomers? You are literally citing a study by somebody who seems to have some, I don't know, possible groomery tendencies in his research. But you're citing that study as, desistance, trans people want to get rid of gays. No, that's not real. Now, again, let's get to the last ridiculous thing that isn't true, and that's it's somehow the existence of trans people literally existing and affirming who they are, is somehow a way to erase gay people, gay men specifically. What? Absurd. And it's pretty disturbing to see somebody who identifies as gay claiming that trans people are attempting to do what is essentially conversion therapy. They're claiming that that social transitioning is conversion therapy. What? The assumption is, obviously, if you're really trans women are just gay men. Yeah, that's it, and they just want to turn themselves into women so they can be with men and not be gay. That doesn't make any sense. It's not. Look, there's a lot of trans women who, by the way, continue after transitioning to date women, cisgender women, and of course, in some cases, they date other trans women. I know generally polling tends to show that there's a lot of transgender women that identify as LGBTQ, that identify as gay as well, and so again, none of that matters though. None of that matters. Sexual orientation is not linked to gender identity. There's no correlation here. There's no studies that prove this, that there's a link between them. Transgender men are not converting. Transgender people are not converting gay men into trans women. That's not the reality. This is a massive amount of disinformation, which again, unfortunately, serves to further a hateful agenda. And that's what's going on here. A hateful agenda based on fear to other people. Look, here's the thing. We've got nothing to fear from transgender people. The real people that you should fear, and maybe fear's a bad thing as well, but maybe the people that their impact we should fear are the ones that continue to go onto the airwaves and spread hate and bigotry towards people that they do not understand.